A lot of you might not know this if you only started watching after my video covering Spectre or Baddington, but I actually got my first real start through YouTube through a video going over a possible FNaF movie. Do I want to talk about that video? No, it's severely outdated by now, and honestly, one of my least favorite videos I've ever made. But since then, a lot on the FNaF movie has come out. It seems like every day our castus is growing, filming has officially started, and we recently saw the reveal of the sign on the restaurant that will be used in the final product. So let me go over everything we know about the FNaF movie so far. But before we talk about all that recent stuff, we need to go back, way back. In March of 2015, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was released as the final game of the series. It was complete at that point, bookended, all there is to it. And shortly after that supposedly final game, in April of 2015, we had the official announcement that a Five Nights at Freddy's movie was in the works. While some were skeptical about this even being real, and many others believing that it was too soon, it would stink, Scott Cawthon would repeatedly reiterate that this is a project he's passionate about. Although he kept releasing games, the movie was still definitely in production. In 2018, during an interview with Daco Games, Scott explained while talking about FNaF World that if he had made the movie like he had made FNaF World, then there would have already been a number of sequels and all of them would have been terrible, indicating that the reason this thing was taking so long was because Scott had put so much time and effort into making sure the movie was the best it could be. However, there was pretty much radio silence after the fact, until about 2021. In 2021, Scott shared a number of scrap screenplay ideas, as well as the one he would finally settle on through a Reddit post titled, "Bad News About the FNaF Movie," frowny face. I'll sum these up rather than read off the whole post, but it will be linked in the description if you do want to read the whole post for yourself. The F screenplay was about teenagers who eventually discover an army of animatronics being made for use by the government. This one was scrapped because of how far it strayed from the source material, and I'm inclined to agree that it would have been terrible. Plushy Steak Manhattan. This one is probably the one we know the least about, and was seemingly scrapped because in hindsight, the concept is very dumb. The Random Charlie screenplay involved a child named Charlie breaking into Freddy's with her friends to retrieve a lost toy. This one was seemingly scrapped because it felt too loosely based on the original games. However, I actually kinda like this idea, and wouldn't have minded this being the final screenplay. The Silver Eyes screenplay would have been an adaptation of the Silver Eyes novel. It's honestly surprising this isn't the route Scott chose, but it's probably because the actual reception to the Silver Eyes novel is very mixed. However, it's worth noting that this screenplay was the one Scott worked on for probably the longest time from what we can tell, but due to shifting the idea to base the story on the games, this screenplay was scrapped. The Pawn Shop screenplay was about an animatronic being stolen from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the other animatronics trying to retrieve them from the pawn shop. Overall, this idea was scrapped because Scott felt it was too after-school cartoony rather than horror. Interestingly, Scott described it as very boy and his animatronic, which I feel means he probably ended up reusing some of these ideas for Security Breach. The Cassidy screenplay is a very interesting one, as it would follow the life and times of Cassidy, who we know is the spirit inside Golden Freddy. However, this screenplay ended up being incredibly cluttered with visual clues, mysteries, and lore that spanned across multiple time periods and locations. Ultimately, it was too complex for a casual audience and was thus scrapped. The Misfit Kids screenplay is another one we know almost nothing about. It was about a teenage boy and his single mother moving into town, with the boy trespassing into a Freddy's location. Apparently, this idea was good in the beginning, but completely stunk by the end. Honestly though, I do feel like parts of this story may have been turned into Fazbear Fright stories. It reminded me of Into the Pit, Out of Stock, and a couple of others. Next is the Ghost Hunters screenplay. This would have centered around a group of amateur ghost hunters investigating Freddy's, which is not a very unusual idea from everything I've seen. However, the biggest flaw with this screenplay was that Scott felt the protagonists of the story just didn't have a strong enough connection to Freddy's for them to feel justifiably important to the story. Which leads into the Insane screenplay. This one involves fun-time animatronics, underground ball pit tunnels, and a vengeful puppet. It apparently started as an evolution of the Ghost Trackers concept, but ended up drifting too far from horror and too much into the action genre. Ultimately, the screenplay was scrapped because similarly to Cassidy, it felt too cluttered. And finally, we have the screenplay Scott settled on, the Mike screenplay. According to Scott, this screenplay seemed obvious. Why didn't he think of it before? It combines the best elements of all the previous screenplays while centering on a story that makes sense. According to Scott, it's scary and fun. But friends, that is not even half the story. I could tell you all the different production houses that this movie went through, but since this is about what we know about the FNaF movie, I'll tell you about the one that stuck. Blumhouse is a production company started by Jason Blum in 2000. It's arguably one of, if not the most well-known horror production companies today, with franchises under its belt like Paranormal Activity, The Conjuring series, Insidious, The Purge, Halloween, and most recently, Megan. Basically, if there's a big cinematic release for a horror movie, you can probably find these guys behind it. So when people found out that the FNaF movie was being produced by Blumhouse, well, people kinda lost their minds, and rightfully so, as more and more information began coming out. Directing the ship would be Emma Tammy, which, as I understand it, has been a controversial choice considering her filmography has most of her films set in the middle of the road in terms of quality. But speaking of quality, Jim Henson's Creature Shop was also confirmed to be working on the movie, producing the animatronics that are to be used, most likely as costumes or puppets. If you don't know Jim Henson's Creature Shop, they're the crew responsible for creating the puppets you see in many films and media today, perhaps most impressively in the Dark Crystal Netflix series. And then we had the reveal of our cast. Once again connecting back to Daco, Scott revealed several actors on a charity stream. Josh Hutcherson is playing Mike Schmidt, the same name as the Night Guard in the first FNaF game. Hutcherson is most well known for his work as Peeta in the Hunger Games series of movies, as well as the Bridge to Terabithia. Remember that movie? Piper Rubio is Abby, Mike's younger sister. As I know, Rubio hasn't really been in all that much, but from what I hear she's a good child actor. Mary Stuart Masterson is an unnamed female villain for now, but we don't know how long she'll really be unnamed. You might know Masterson from At Close Range, but I know her from the show NCIS. But the biggest reveal of this stream was the reveal of Matthew Lillard as William Afton. Matthew Lillard is an actor who's probably most famous for his role as Shaggy in the live-action Scooby-Doo movies and voicing the character ever since. However, he's also well known for his role as Stu in the original Scream. Stu was a psychotic killer who wasn't able to properly place value on a human life, worrying more about his parents getting mad at him than the number of people he's killed. But probably his most unsung role is in the movie 13 Ghosts, where he plays a psychic who is able to sense the presence of the dead. However, exposure to their negative energy often sent him into shock or seizures. Overall, I believe Lillard is probably my favorite casting in this entire movie so far, and the memes that came out of it are the best ever. However, there is one character unaccounted for so far. As seen through a leaked document, as well as teased on Blumhouse's Twitter, there is a character named Vanessa who appears to be a cop investigating Freddy's. However, her actor has not been revealed yet. What's most interesting about this character being named Vanessa is how this ties the FNaF movie into the games in an odd way, since Vanessa shouldn't really be around until much later in the story, when she becomes Vanny. Is it possible that this is the character Masterson is playing? Maybe. After that whole reveal, the casting just started pouring in, with a number of kids being hired as ghost kids, and a posting asking for kids to be involved in a birthday party scene. Also through an interview, Matthew Lillard revealed that he had signed on to 3 FNaF movies, which is just the most insane thing I've heard as of late. But then we finally got our first real look at anything that will actually be featured in the movie. The sign. This sign, which was actually made back in January but not revealed to be for the movie until February, depicts a pretty basic pizza place sign for the 80s to 90s time period of the film. However, there is some controversy regarding it. In particular, the head of Freddy on this sign appears to be traced from art by Lady Fizzy, a FNaF artist who is well known for her, well, let's just say less than moral doings. The other big thing people noticed was that Freddy is shown in the sign to be wearing white gloves, something brand new to his design. Now this is something that immediately stuck out to me as something involving the Jim Henson side of this production. When looking at the FNaF 1 cast, with the exception of Foxy, all these characters have extremely stiff and rigid fingers that wouldn't be able to work quite like, well, fingers. These gloves are probably the supplement so that the animatronics can actually use their fingers. Or rather, an actor can use their fingers when wearing the suit. That's my little theory anyway. Regardless, this seems to be the pinnacle of information we know so far. In hindsight, we know a lot about the FNaF movie, but at the same time, Next to nothing. The funny thing is that even though we know who's playing who, and what the sign looks like in that, we have no idea just what is going to happen in this movie. My personal theory? We'll see William Afton get springlocked, the second movie will have him as Springtrap, and then the third movie will have him as either Scraptrap or Burntrap. Oh, and with Abby being Mike's younger sister, I'd be very surprised if we don't eventually see Circus Baby. Hell, even the name Abby is an anagram of the word baby. And that's pretty much where my original script ended, as before I had begun writing this was all the important information we knew of. But then this funny little thing happened. Fake leaks. Now, there's a pretty infamous Twitter account going around sharing this kind of news, as if it was, well, news. So I just want to quickly dispel some misinformation. This picture you may have seen of Foxy has been proven to be a fake, with the hoaxer coming out of the woodwork to reveal it. Although it is a damn good fake, like, this does look like a Jim Henson take on Foxy, I'm pretty impressed. I was actually kinda excited when I thought this was real, but it's nothing more than a hoax, which is actually kinda impressive. The hoax era of FNaF seemingly ended after FNaF 2, so it's kind of nostalgic to see people try and trick others like this. That's everything we know about the FNaF movie so far. Be sure to subscribe, and maybe I'll talk about the movie some more when more is revealed. I'm super excited for this movie, I've been waiting for it, but I never thought it would come out. Now, every day it's seeming more and more real. Until then, I'm DMuted. Peace.